A weary single father shelters a pregnant teen on a snowy night. Years later, their lives intertwine in ways neither imagined, revealing that sometimes family isn't given, it's found in the quiet spaces of kindness and grace. Before we begin, if you believe in the quiet magic of kindness and healing with love, subscribe, and let's walk this path together. The wind cut through Main Street like a living thing, dragging scraps of paper across the frozen pavement. Snowflakes swirled under the pale light of the diner's neon sign, clinging to the window panes in trembling patterns. Inside, Jack Wright wiped down the last table, his hands moving on instinct. The diner was empty now, save for the faint smell of coffee grounds and baking grease hanging in the air. He flipped the sign to closed and pocketed his keys. The world outside was silent except for the crunch of his boots on packed snow. He pulled his coat tighter against the cold and turned toward the truck parked at the curb. That's when he saw her. At first, she was just a shape, still and small, pressed into the narrow space between the diner and the boarded-up hardware store. Only when she shifted slightly did he catch the faint glint of her eyes in the darkness. A girl. 17, maybe. Her hoodie was soaked through, clinging to thin shoulders. Dark hair stuck to her cheeks in wet strands, and her arms wrapped tightly around her middle, not out of fear, Jack realized, but around the swollen curve of her belly. He froze. This wasn't his problem. He had enough to manage. A daughter waiting at home. Bills stacking up like fallen leaves. He told himself to keep walking, to let the snow swallow her the way it swallowed everything else. But then her shoulders jerked in a shudder, and he heard it, a sound so faint it barely reached him. Not a sob. More like an apology whispered to the air. Jack's jaw tightened. "God damn it," he muttered, and stepped toward her. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he said gently, hands raised. "You're freezing out here. Come inside. Just for a little while." She shook her head, curls bouncing. I can't." "Yes, you can. It's okay." Her gaze darted toward the street like a cornered animal. Jack softened his tone. "You don't have to talk. Just come out of the cold before you turn to ice." At last, she let him guide her through the door. The warmth hit like a wall. Jack switched the lights back on, and the glow revealed her pale face. Her lips were cracked, her fingers trembling as she tried to peel off the wet hoodie. "Here." He draped his coat over her narrow shoulders. "Sit. Right here by the heater." She perched on the edge of a booth like she expected it to collapse under her weight. "You got a name?" Jack asked as he crouched to light the fire in the corner stove. "Hannah," she whispered. "I'm Jack. You hungry?" A pause. Then a small shake of her head. "You should eat something anyway." Silence stretched between them as Jack set water to boil. Outside, the wind clawed at the windows, but in here the only sound was the faint hiss of the kettle and the crackle of firewood catching flame. "Do you have family nearby?" Jack asked softly. Her eyes fell to the floor. "No." They know where you are?" Her lips pressed tight, and she shook her head. Jack let out a slow breath. "All right. You can stay here for now. Warm up. When the storm passes, we'll figure out the rest." For the first time, her shoulders sagged, and she whispered, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Jack said. Back at the house, Ellie was waiting by the fire, her sketchbook open on her lap. "Daddy, you're late," she said, her voice edged with relief. "Storm slowed me down," Jack replied. "We have a guest tonight." Ellie's eyes went wide when she saw Hannah standing in the doorway, clinging to Jack's coat. "This is Hannah. She's staying for the night." Hannah avoided Ellie's gaze, but Ellie offered a small wave. Jack laid out a quilt on the couch. "You can sleep here. It's not much, but it's warm." "Thank you," Hannah murmured again. Ellie leaned toward her father. "Daddy, is she gonna have a baby?" Hannah's hand went instinctively to her belly. "Yes," Jack said softly. "Oh," Ellie whispered. "Do you want some water?" Hannah's lips twitched into the barest flicker of a smile. "That would be nice." Later, Jack sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. His phone buzzed. "Jack," said Mrs. Callahan's sharp voice on the line. "I saw a girl wandering in the snow earlier. Pregnant. You didn't see her, did you?" Jack's eyes drifted to the couch, where Hannah lay curled under the quilt, her breathing slow and steady. "No," he said quietly. "Haven't seen a thing." The firelight danced across Hannah's sleeping face, catching the faint trace of tears dried on her cheeks. Jack rubbed a hand over his tired eyes and whispered to himself, "What the hell are you doing?" But deep down, he already knew. The house was silent except for the occasional groan of old pipes settling against the winter cold. Jack sat at the edge of his bed, pulling his boots on in the dim light before dawn. His eyes burned from too little sleep, but his thoughts refused to quiet long enough to rest. He could still see her, Hannah, curled on the couch downstairs, the quilt pulled up to her chin, her thin frame trembling even in sleep. Allie's bedroom door was cracked open. He peeked inside as he passed. She kicked off her blankets again, one arm flung over the stuffed rabbit she never let go of. For a moment, Jack smiled faintly. Then his gaze fell back to the couch. Hannah hadn't stirred when he crept past her into the kitchen. He moved carefully, unwilling to wake her yet. The kettle whistled low, and he filled a mug, letting the steam warm his face. The snowstorm had passed in the night, but the world outside remained smothered in white silence. Jack rubbed his thumb along the rim of the mug, thinking. She said her name was Hannah. That was all he knew. No last name. No family. No explanation for how a pregnant teenager ended up half frozen on his doorstep. And now here she was, asleep in his house like a stray animal he couldn't bring himself to chase off. When the floorboards creaked, he glanced up. Hannah was standing there barefoot, her hair mussed and her eyes puffy from sleep. She held the quilt tight around her shoulders, as though bracing for him to yell. "Morning," Jack said softly. "Morning." Her voice was hoarse. "You hungry?" She hesitated. Then, a little. "Sit. I'll make something." Hannah lingered in the doorway for a moment longer, then lowered herself onto a kitchen chair as if expecting it to collapse. Jack cracked eggs into a pan. "You sleep okay?" She nodded, staring at her hands. "You're safe here," he said quietly. Her fingers tightened around the mug he set in front of her. Steam curled into the air between them, delicate and fleeting. When Ellie padded into the kitchen later, she froze at the sight of Hannah. "Hi," she said shyly. "Hi," Hannah murmured. Ellie's gaze dropped to the roundness of Hannah's belly. "Is the baby okay?" Hannah blinked. "Yeah. She's fine." Ellie's lips quirked into a small smile. "Good." Jack set a plate of toast in front of his daughter. "Eat up, Bug." As they sat together in the quiet kitchen, Jack felt an odd sense of normalcy threading through the unease. He could almost pretend this was just another morning, almost. At the diner, Jack flipped the open sign and tried to ignore the stares. Mrs. Callahan came in mid-morning, her arms loaded with grocery bags. She narrowed her eyes as she leaned on the counter. "Jack, right? I heard you took in that girl." Jack kept his tone even. "Don't know what you're talking about." "She's trouble. Girls like that always are." "She's a kid," Jack said. "She's a pregnant kid," Mrs. Callahan shot back. "If her own family didn't keep her, why should you?" Jack clenched his jaw. "You want your usual coffee, or are you just here to gossip?" She sniffed. "Coffee. Black." As he poured it, Jack forced himself to breathe. He wasn't about to let this town chew Hannah up the way it chewed up everyone who didn't fit its narrow rules. When he got home that evening, the smell of soup surprised him. Hannah was in the kitchen with Ellie, stirring a pot with tentative care. "I thought I'd try to cook something," she said when she noticed him. "To help." Jack's shoulders softened. "That's kind of you." "It was my mom's recipe," Hannah added softly. Then her face shuddered, and she focused on the spoon again. Ellie tugged Jack's sleeve. "She taught me how to braid hair." "Did she now?" Jack smiled faintly at Hannah. Hannah's cheeks flushed. "She's a quick learner." That night, Jack sat at the table with his ledger open, pretending to tally numbers. In truth, he was watching Hannah from the corner of his eye. She was curled up on the couch again, Ellie's stuffed rabbit clutched loosely in her lap. The storm had left drifts higher than the porch railing outside, and moonlight glinted off the white hills like glass. Jack's phone buzzed. It was his ex-wife. "You've got Ellie in the same house as some pregnant stranger," she hissed the second he picked up. "Her name is Hannah," Jack said. "I don't care what her name is. This isn't safe. She's not a threat." "Jack, you always try to fix people. You can't save everyone." "Maybe not," Jack murmured. "But I can help one." The sound of soft footsteps pulled his attention to the hallway. Hannah stood there, her coat in her hands, her bag slung over one shoulder. "Where are you going?" Jack asked. "I can't stay. I heard you on the phone. I don't want to cause trouble for you." "You're not." "Yes, I am. People are talking." "Let them," Jack said firmly. She shook her head, tears welling. "You don't understand. This isn't my place." Jack crossed the room, stopping just a step away from her. "Where would you even go?" he asked gently. Hannah's lips trembled. "Anywhere but here." "I don't want to ruin you." "You're not ruining anything," Jack said. "You and that baby, you deserve a warm place, even if you don't believe it yet." Hannah's shoulders sagged. The coat slipped from her hands to the floor. "I don't know how to stay," she whispered. "Then let me teach you," Jack said. Later, when the house had settled into quiet again, Hannah sat awake by the fire, staring at the sketch Ellie had left for her, a stick figure girl holding hands with a smaller figure labeled baby. Jack watched her from the kitchen doorway. "You're not alone anymore, Hannah," he said softly. She didn't answer, but her fingers traced the drawing's faint lines as if trying to memorize them. Spring crept into the town like a shy visitor, melting the snowdrifts into rivulets that trickled along the cracked sidewalks. The air carried the faint smell of damp earth and thawed pine, and in Jack's small house, the world felt softer somehow, as if winter's long shadow had finally loosened its grip. The days fell into a quiet rhythm. Jack would rise early and head to the diner, his boots tracking mud instead of ice now. Ellie spent hours on the front porch, sketching everything from the bare trees to the finches gathering twigs for their nests. And Hannah was changing. There was a time when she moved through the house like a ghost, afraid to leave footprints, afraid to be seen. Now she hovered in the kitchen beside Ellie, her hands tentative but willing as they chopped carrots for stew. Her belly had grown heavier, her steps slower, but in rare unguarded moments, she'd smile at something Ellie said, and for a second she almost looked like a girl her age instead of a frightened mother-to-be. Jack noticed it all from the corner of his eye, the way Hannah traced her fingers over Ellie's drawings, the way Ellie slipped her tiny stuffed rabbit into Hannah's lap when she thought no one was looking. Late one night, as Jack fixed a squeaky hinge on the back door, Hannah lingered nearby, her voice low. "You fixed everything in this house since I got here," she said. Jack glanced at her over his shoulder. "Trying to keep it standing." She hesitated. "What about me? What about you? Can you fix me too?" Jack set the screwdriver down gently, turning to meet her gaze. Her eyes glistened in the dim light, but there was no anger there, just rawness, like a wound laid bare. "You're not broken, Hannah," he said quietly. She didn't argue. but she didn't believe him either. The contraction started on a Tuesday evening, just as rain began pattering against the roof. Hannah was folding laundry when she froze, one hand gripping the edge of the table. Her breath came in shallow gasps. "Jack," she whispered. He was there in an instant. "It's happening," she said, her voice tight with panic. "Oh God, I'm not ready." "Yes, you are." No, I can't do this." "You already are." Jack's words were steady, but inside his chest a wild fear had taken hold. He grabbed Ellie's raincoat and his own jacket, barking instructions in a voice that brooked no argument. "Ellie, stay close. Hannah, breathe. We're going now." The rain came harder as they drove to the hospital. Wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear, and every stoplight felt too long. Hannah clutched the dashboard, her knuckles white. "It hurts," she cried. "Jack, I can't." "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "Just hold on a little longer." When they burst into the hospital, nurses whisked Hannah into a room while Jack and Ellie trailed behind, water dripping from their coats. The hours passed in a haze of pain and soft encouragement. Jack sat at Hannah's side, her fingers crushing his in a desperate grip. "You're doing great," he murmured over and over. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't be a mother. I don't know how." "You'll learn," Jack said. "You already love her. That's what matters." "But what if she hates me?" "She won't. She'll see what I see." Hannah sobbed, her body racked by another contraction. "You're not alone anymore," Jack whispered. When the baby finally arrived, it was nearly dawn. Hannah's scream gave way to a trembling silence as the newborn's first cry split the air. The nurse placed a small, wrinkled bundle in Hannah's arms. She stared down at the child, her lips quivering. "Hi," she whispered hoarsely. "Hi, baby girl." The baby let out a soft wail, and Hannah cradled her closer, her tears falling freely now. Jack stepped back, chest tight. He'd done his part, brought her here, kept her steady, but this was her moment. He wasn't sure he belonged in it. "Jack!" Hannah's voice pulled him back. She looked up at him with damp lashes and a tentative smile. "Do you want to meet her?" Jack's throat felt too thick to speak, so he nodded. Hannah held the baby out slightly. "This is Grace." The name settled in the air like a blessing. Jack brushed a finger against the baby's tiny fist. She latched onto it with surprising strength. "Grace," he murmured. "That's perfect." When they returned home days later, everything felt different. The house was still small, still drafty in places, but now it held the soft scent of baby powder and the sound of a newborn's cries. Hannah walked slowly from room to room, as if trying to memorize every corner. Jack watched her carefully. "You okay?" he asked one evening as she stood by the window, Grace nestled against her shoulder. Hannah nodded but didn't look at him. "I should leave soon." "Leave?" "This isn't my home. It's yours and Ellie's." Jack leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "You can stay if you want to. It doesn't feel right." "I don't want to impose." "You're not." Hannah's lips pressed into a thin line. "I've been nothing but trouble since the night you found me." "You've been a lot of things," Jack said softly. "But never trouble." That night, after Hannah put Grace to sleep, she found Ellie's latest drawing on the coffee table, four stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. Hannah stared at it for a long time. She traced her finger over the smallest figure, a baby in a pink dress, and whispered, "Is this us?" Ellie's voice came from behind her. "Yeah. It's us now." Jack sat in the kitchen, listening to the faint sound of Hannah's voice as she hummed to Grace. He let out a slow breath. Maybe, just maybe, they were all learning how to stay. The first snowfall came softly, as if the sky was exhaling a long-held breath. Flakes drifted down in lazy spirals, settling on rooftops, blanketing fences, clinging to the bare arms of trees. The whole town seemed to hush under the weight of it, the silence so complete it felt holy. On the porch, Jack stood with his hands shoved into his coat pockets, watching the snow settle on the worn boards beneath his boots. Behind him, the warm light of the house spilled through the window, flickering like a heartbeat. A small voice broke the quiet. "Papa. Look." Grace bounded through the front door, her boots thudding against the floorboards. A crooked snowball wobbled in her mittened hands, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Her wool hat had slipped sideways, and wisps of dark hair stuck to her damp forehead. Jack crouched, steadying the snowball before it crumbled. "You've got enough for a snowman yet?" "Almost. Ellie's helping, but she keeps making the head too small." Behind her, Ellie appeared in the doorway. She was taller now, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. She held a carrot in one hand and smirked. "The head's proportional," Ellie said. "Grace just wants a giant snow monster." "Monster!" Grace squealed, spinning in a circle until her hat slipped over her eyes. Jack laughed, tucking the hat back into place. "Careful there, Peanut." Through the kitchen window, Hannah watched them. One hand rested against the glass, fingertips brushing the cold surface. The glow of the porch light caught her face, and for a moment, she looked almost like the girl she'd once been before fear hardened her edges, before life taught her to run. 5 winters had passed since that night Jack found her in the snow. The memory lived in her still, sharp and fragile, but now it felt like it belonged to someone else. This life, this warm, noisy, imperfect thing, was something she'd been given without ever knowing how to ask for it. And she still wasn't sure she deserved to keep it. Dinner was simple that night. The house smelled of thyme and garlic as steam curled from the pot on the stove. Hannah moved quietly between the table and the counter, checking the bread, her movements careful and unhurried. Ellie sat peeling carrots, her fingers quick and sure, while Grace bounced on a kitchen chair, humming under her breath. "Grace," Hannah said gently. "Feet down, please." "I'm hungry now," Grace whined. "You're always hungry," Ellie teased, and Grace stuck her tongue out in reply. Jack leaned against the doorframe, watching them. The sound of their voices, the soft clink of cutlery, the hush of snow outside, it all wove together into a kind of music. Hannah looked up and caught his eye. The moment hung there, unspoken but alive. Later, after the girls were asleep, Hannah stood in Grace's doorway, one hand resting on the frame. Grace was sprawled across her little bed, the stuffed rabbit Ellie had given her years ago clutched tight against her chest. Her small mouth opened and closed in a sigh, lashes fanned across her cheeks. Hannah felt the ache again. It had lived inside her for years now, curling tight in her chest. The fear that all of this, Jack's steady kindness, Ellie's laughter, Grace's warm little arms, might disappear one day, because maybe she didn't deserve to stay. When she walked into the living room, Jack was there, seated by the fire, a book resting on his knee. "She's out?" he asked. "She's out," Hannah murmured. She stayed near the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. Jack tilted his head. "Something on your mind?" Her throat felt tight. "Jack, do you ever wonder if I was a mistake?" He set the book aside, the sound of it closing soft but final. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she forced the words out. "You could have sent me away that night. You should have. But instead you let me stay, and now there's all this. And I don't know if I was worth it." Jack's brows drew together. "Hannah," he said softly. She shook her head, voice cracking. "I was broken when you found me. Some days I still am. And Grace, she deserves better than a mother who doesn't always know how to be one." Jack rose slowly, his boots whispering against the worn floorboards. "You think you don't belong here?" "I know I don't," she whispered. Jack stopped just in front of her. "You stayed," he said. "Even when it was hard. Even when you wanted to run. You love that little girl with everything you have. You've been Ellie's family too. And you've been mine." Tears welled in her eyes. "Even broken things can mend when they're loved right," Jack murmured. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "I don't know if I'll ever feel like I deserve this," she said. You don't have to, he replied. You just have to keep showing up. That's enough. The next morning, Grace came bounding into the kitchen, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in her tiny hands. Papa. Mama. Look what I made. She held up the drawing with a grin wide enough to split her face. It was simple, 4 stick figures standing under a yellow sun. One was labeled Papa, another Mama. Beside them, 2 smaller figures, Ellie and me. This is us, Grace said proudly. Jack felt something twist in his chest, an ache so deep and tender it almost hurt. Hannah took the picture in her hands, staring at it as though it might disappear. My greatest blessing, she whispered, so softly he almost didn't hear her. Jack reached for her hand, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. That night, after the house had settled into quiet, Hannah sat in the glow of the firelight, her hands resting in her lap. Jack was beside her, not touching but close enough for her to feel his warmth. Thank you, she said suddenly. He turned his head slightly. For what? For everything. For saving me when I didn't even know I wanted to be saved. Jack smiled faintly. No. Thank you. Hannah frowned. For what? For staying, he said. That's all I ever needed. Outside, snow fell soundlessly, covering the world in white. But inside the small house, there was light and warmth and the fragile, steady pulse of a family finding its way. And for the first time in years, Hannah felt completely, impossibly whole.